Okay, thank you very much, everybody. This meeting. If you'd be so good as to call the roll.
Hank Delay,
Here.
Jeffrey True,
Here.
Carolyn Chang,
Here.
Chuck Nocera has asked to be excused. Elliot Emel, Jan Vink,
Here.
Marsha Lynch. Here. Margaret Hobby. Here. And Vivek Iyer has asked to be excused as well.
Thank you very much. First item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from the meeting of March 22nd. Those minutes have been sent to all of you. I have a motion for their adoption.
Okay, also move.
Second. Marcia, second by Jeff. Discussion. Any suggested revision or amendments? Hearing none, all in favor of the adoption?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Turning to see if we have any comments from either members of the county legislature, municipal officials, members of the public. I see we have Randy Brown with us, and I see his hand is raised. Mr. Brown.
Hello,
Hi, welcome.
thank you. I'm just curious about the process and that's about it. I'm new to the legislature, so it's one more thing to learn. So that's it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being with us.
Yep.
Next on the agenda, I have an update on progress of the city and redistricting working group. I'm pleased to report to you that we have essentially completed our work. We have submitted map that is developed after receiving public comment on the draft proposed map that was put out to the public. We had a session last Tuesday night, which went over all the comments that had been received. We made a number of revisions to the draft city map, specifically moving census block near the Ithaca Police Department and Prospect Street from Ward 2 into Ward 3. So it's continued to be part of the South Hill District or Ward. We've also moved the census block that contains the Ithaca High School over to be connected to Ward 5. We moved similarly in response to recommendations we received from member of the Common Council, Cynthia Brock. We moved the census block that contains the TCAT facility and the Department of Public Works over to be connected to the second ward. I mentioned the high school. I should also have mentioned the golf course. And the golf course continues to be connected to Ward 5. Most of the comments that we received on the draft map related to the use of Lynn Street in the city as a dividing line between Fall Creek area and the Cornell Heights area. You'll recall that the census block that includes the east side of Lynn Street and the west side of University Avenue is a very large census block in terms of population, 526 persons in that single census block. The use of Lynn Street as a boundary made sense to the city working group from many perspectives, but there was a concern on the part of some residents that they would not be part of Fall Creek or not seen as part of Fall Creek. We've considered that. We note that wherever a boundary is used, it goes down the middle of the street. And inevitably, someone feels, well, I've always been connected with the other side of the street. Now am I somewhat at a loss? I note that one of the press reports of a comment I made at the public hearing noted that I had said, well, they now would have double the representation on the Common Council. Instead of having 2 people representing Lynn Street, there now would be 4 people representing Lynn Street, 2 on each side of the street. So the working group did not make a change in that particular area. And with those modifications, the city redistricting working group unanimously voted in favor of a map with those revisions. We have developed a draft final report that will go to the mayor and to the Common Council. That draft report will be considered by the working group next Tuesday night as next and perhaps last meeting. I anticipate that the report will be approved that evening, and we are on the tentative schedule for the Common Council to receive our report on May 4th. And the Common Council will then decide what they wish to do with our submission. And I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions about the work of the city redistricting working group.
Just a comment, my block has been separated for 40 years at least. I think you might get reunited again. But that is true. I mean, it's sometimes you've got 4 council people working for you. So that actually is a nice aspect of having the word line go down the middle of your block.
Okay. Can I just have, if Carolyn and Randy, were you able to hear Margaret's comment?
Sorry.
You are,
Yeah.
okay. Good, thank you. Okay, let's then move right along into review of maps. At our last meeting, we requested Craig and Svetla to develop a number of alternatives related to scenarios 15 and 16. And 2 alternative maps on each of those scenarios have been sent to us yesterday. Let me turn the program over to our distinguished staff director, Mr. Potter.
Thank you. So as a refresher, we ended our last meeting with a request to focus on scenarios 15 and 16, which we did. And in particular, the focus was on seeing what we could do based on whatever may have come out from the recommendation from the city ward discussion. So we started with that as a basis and did some other tweaks. So what will be presented to you for scenario 15 includes an exact replication of the city ward boundaries in both of those versions for scenario 15. In scenario 16, we did the same thing with one exception, which is the one-way couplet area between Fulton and Meadow Streets. So there was one little minor deviation, but one chunk that was different from the city ward boundaries, but we needed to add more population. And that was a really good, clean way to make the distinction. And if we so choose to go in that direction, that's an area that I think the Board of Elections would approve for the management of future elections, because they can easily define that as an election district in the future. So that'd be pretty clean for them. So there would be one distinction within the city election districts in the future, if we go that way. So I'm going to start with the conversation of 15, scenario 15, if that's okay. And I'll start with version 4. So when we looked at the 15 scenarios, it's important to understand that the ideal population for the county for the scenarios 15 is 7,049. And for the city, it's going to be a much different number for the city numbers. Can you bring up the city maps, please? And we had to, so the total or the ideal population, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's, Hank, I'm not sure if you scroll down, Svetlana, I'm not sure if Ruth has the ideal population on the bottom. 6,421, right? So, so we had to try to match that as close as possible in the scenarios 15. And so the first scenario, version 4 of 15, we did so between the city and the county based on adding population to District 1, which would be in the northwesterly direction for the town of Ithaca. So you'll see that chunk for the town of Ithaca was added to Ward 1, which is kind of what we have now as well, which is the current map that's hanging on the wall.
So to focus on that for just a moment, Greg, that is reflected where you see the Highway 96 sign.
Right. So
it goes through the town of Ithaca up to the border of Ulysses.
Right, and that would be the upper northwest corner for the town of Ithaca that you'll see where the label is that Svel is showing is 1, is pointing to that area right there. So that section of the town was merged or added to the legislative district 1 in the city. And also we had the numbering for the city legislative districts identical to the city wards. So there's less confusion comparing to if you need to. Legislative district 2 would be wholly contained within the city and matches the boundaries there. Legislative district 5 encroaches or moves into the town and towards the Hasbrook apartments. So it had to grab the Hasbrook apartment population to meet the requirement there. And District 4, it gets a little strange because we had to, again, move into the town, but we had the majority of the population, unfortunately, is you see that little triangle down between the orange and, right there. That's the majority of the population as you move into the town for District 4, unfortunately, is in that area. So we had to go dip down to grab that population to balance that out. We couldn't keep on going further east into the town because there is no population once you get into that area. So
the area you're dealing with there is essentially the Maple Avenue apartments that have been constructed by Cornell over the last few years.
You bet.
Going up to East Hill Plaza.
Yes. Then District 3 grabs population from the town to balance it out again towards Honest Lane, that area along 79. So that would be up to Pine Tree Road. So what you'll find in version 4 for scenario 15 is that in order to mimic the city ward boundaries, we have to grab more population for most of the city areas. And the only way to do that is within the town. So we had to do that in 1, 2, 4, 3, 4 areas to balance it out. So the first approach, so that's a given. We have to grab population from the town to balance out the city for 15 legislative. There's no way around that.
One question about 2, especially the area south of Straight Street. Because 7,000 is far from the Ithaca average population. So I think the area south of State Street is added to
The city, it goes to green. Right, which is what we do here, but I think the difference, so we've got a population of 7,000. You know what? I'm not sure, Jan, why that is that way. I have to dig around a little bit more, but you are correct. I don't know why that differs.
Maybe go to Clinton Street.
Yeah, right. Thank
Go
you
to
for pointing it
Clinton
out.
Street. We
So,
go to Clinton.
so there's a little difference there in two.
We go to Clinton Street.
So we have to grab more population to the south. So my previous statement about it being exact is incorrect. Sorry. So we had to add more population from what is defined as City Ward 1 and move it into District 2 to balance it out. Thank you.
Let me ask a different question. It may just be how it ended up being printed on the map. But District 4, in the tiny little section that touches Mitchell Street, in the town, is it contiguous with the area to the north of
Oh, it
Maple
is.
Avenue?
Yeah, it's hard to see, but it is. Yes. Barely.
Okay.
Yep.
In a sense, it looks like the,
Yeah.
Right.
You have that border that overlaps that, but it is contiguous.
okay, thank you.
Yep. So balancing out the city and the town was problematic in many ways when we started this and for 15 scenarios. In addition, then I'm going to move up into the village of Cuba Heights and the village of Lansing. And when you get into the numbers for scenarios 15, again, we can't keep the villages intact like we have them right now. So we started by saying, okay, what do we do about that? And the first approach was, we have to keep them together, but we have to split part of the village and give it to the town of Lansing, which I'm not sure if that meets the mandate of one of the guidelines from the state of the 40% rule, because I'm not sure if they mean 40% that of which district between the two, because we can talk about that later, and that might be a legal interpretation. But for the sake of argument, we did it that way, but that has to be further explored if this is an option. You want to look at it further. So the East Shore area, which is in the town of Ithaca, gets associated with Cuba Heights in this scenario. That's always a little unusual spot in this project because it kind of is a town of Ithaca area, but it's contiguous with Cuba Heights and next to the lake. So it's a sliver that runs up along Stewart Park and past the chamber. So
I don't think it touches any other part of the town.
it does not, and it's
Yeah.
weird. It's a strange thing. It's just touches the lake, which is in the town. But then once you get to the northern boundary, then the town of Lansing starts.
Right.
So that approach then on 15 leads, when you start with trying to mimic the city boundaries for 15, it leads to further complications around the rest of the county, which vary dramatically from what we have currently. So you'll see that, Lansing in this scenario then goes up all along the lake, and then the Groton area moves into Lansing, and then Dryden gets split up into 3 different pieces. And Danby and Caroline are no longer attacked. And the Ellis Hollow-ish area gets added to the Danby Caroline District 12 as well. We were also doing our best to keep, based on what was going on, to keep the rest of the town of Ithaca balanced as much as possible and keep it contiguous. And so that's one nice thing about this scenario is that it does a nice job of between the large chunks of the town of Ithaca, between the east and the west. So, and in this scenario, I think this is the only one or one of the few where we were able to keep the circle apartment area for IC in adjacent to IC within the same district. So there's two big population areas within IC. One is on campus and the other is just south of campus there in those apartment complexes. And then moving around.
So just, since I'm slow, about the apartment complexes for IC,
Yes,
is that in District 11,
that is in District 13.
13?
And that's that little cul-de-sac area that you'll see right above King Road label right there. District 14, which is Newfield, Enfield, or the numbering sequence we can play around with after the fact, but we tried to just keep the numbering sequence started from the center of the county and rotate around clockwise, so it may not match the numbering sequence of what's in place right now. So when I talk about numbers, that's the scenarios that I'm presenting. Okay, so I'm going to refer to the next area for the town of Newfield and the town of Enfield. Unfortunately, that changes significantly in this area where you've got Newfield in the center, and then part of Enfield and a sliver of Danby and is added to that. Then moving up towards Ulysses, you'll see that we did our best to keep the core of Enfield intact in the center along 327, and then on either side of that, east and west, are chunks that would go to the district to the north or Ulysses and Transfer area. And I'm ready to give this similar explanation of the differences between version 5, which is a different.
So this one has the most amount of the town of Ithaca in District 1 that would be added outside of the city. It's
Yes, geographically.
Right.
The largest area.
so it goes all the way out to, I think that's Sheffield Road, is it?
Bundy,
Well, Bundy. No, but it's north of Bundy is,
Iredell.
Iredell is on the part of the way there. I think Iredell is even above Hay,
Right.
but it goes
This is
the
Bundy.
north.
no, you're on the wrong scenario.
Yes.
North-south road is Sheffield
Bundy.
on the town border.
I believe so. I can't tell you that date right now yet.
You've got it printed on the brown
Right,
side of District 13.
right. Oh, yeah, I see it now. Yep.
But geographically, it appears to almost double this geographic size of cities of District 1.
Yes.
A lot of territory.
So I'm going to move on to V5, scenario 15 next. The concept of trying to maintain city ward boundaries is the same, but we took a different take on it, particularly in the west part of the city and the town of Ithaca. So what we did is what happens if we, start looking at adding the population in West Hill directly to Ward 1, and how far would we have to go into the town to get a population that meets the requirement for our spreads. we did our best, but unfortunately, it may not look contiguous, but it is another case of the map, but it stretches all the way around in the town. And you have to come up and grab the Ithaca College population, regardless of what you do in the town of Ithaca, to balance it out. So you have to reach around because the probably about half of the population in that District 13 for the town of Ithaca is associated with IC. So you have to wrap around to grab IC. You can't, if you continue without IC and you give IC to the other side of the town, then you overdo the population on that side. So you've got to always, in our scenarios, everything that we've done, we had to associate IC population to the western part of the town to balance anything out. So I wanted to show you what it looked like. And to do so. And then the approaches that we've taken for the other areas are similar to what we did in the past for the town and the city of Ithaca balances between the other districts that we've already talked about with version 4 on the east side of the city in the town. The rest of the scenarios or the rest of the boundaries are the same, with the exception that we took a different approach to looking at the village of Lansing. So you'll see now that the western part of the village of Lansing, west of Triphammer, it's associated with the town of Lansing, District 7, and the East Shore is associated with that as well. That East Shore little area that I spoke of earlier,
Which is town of
Yes.
Ithaca.
right? Which is the town of Ithaca that gets associated with Lansing in this area. Yes. Then we were able. I wanted to show you that in order to keep the two villages as much intact, that's the best we could do. And that's kind of a crazy idea, but you got the village of Kew Heights intact, and then you got half of the village of Lansing intact. But the east side of Ithaca looks nice, the town. So in this scenario, the town would be represented by 8 county legislative districts. The first one we talked about is 6.
And currently it's 5 or 6?
5.
And that doesn't include Kew Heights, or does it?
It does include Kew Heights
I get 8 Kew Heights.
for V4.
V5.
Oh, V5.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
And I count 7 and 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 7. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got 6. You know, what do you?
Okay, you guys, and the orange, and there's 3 little pockets, that's 5. And then on the western side, 2. 13.
The
3, 4, 5, 6.
area on East Shore Drive is associated with Kew Heights on V4.
Yeah, that's District 6.
Right.
We count District 3, 4, 5, 6, 11, 13, and 1.
Oh, I missed 5. I'm sorry, you're right. Yep. Yep, I missed 1. Yep.
So how do you all feel about versions 4 and 5 of scenario 15? Do I have any wows? This is great.
I think there are better options than 15, any of the 15 options.
I can't see Carolyn on the screen at the moment, so I'm just reaching out to her to ask if she has any comments.
Not really. I mean, from looking over the maps before the meeting, I, in general, thought 16 had some cleaner lines than 15s, both the 15s.
Thank you, Carolyn. Well, given that enthusiasm, let's move on and have Greg talk about the 16, 3 and 4.
So can you start by bringing up the city map for me, please? Okay, so back to the boundaries of the city ward, just to make sure we're on track here. So we are able to differentiate on, that's Clinton Street. Or is that, I'm sorry,
Not green,
what is that?
green,
Green Street,
green.
Right.
Green.
yes,
Cascadon.
green. So that matches what we've done and what the city has done as well. And in the 16 scenarios, not the 15. So the only exception, again, just to reiterate, between the county boundaries and the city boundaries for the 16 scenarios is the area between the one-way couplets of Fulton and Meadow. Okay.
So to the west of Fulton,
Yeah,
right there.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
kind of weird hammerhead shaped, mushroom shaped, whatever.
West is Meadow.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll show you what that looks like.
West of Meadow, right.
Okay, bring up the V3A, please. Right, and so you'll see that in District 2 in the pinkish color there. So I'm gonna, again, start in the city for V3A and give a quick description. So the first scenario and the second one, once we realized how far we'd have to go into West Hill to grab the population to add to the first district, we thought it was much more practical just to continue in the northwest direction and not pursue that idea any further. So both of the 16 scenarios, you're going to see the population for legislative district 1, in order to balance it, needs to look into the town of Ithaca, and we did so along the lakefront, between 96 and the lake, northwest of the city of town.
And if I recall correctly, Greg, this is very similar to the District 1 for the period from 2002 to 2010.
Right, in all the redistricting projects I've been involved in, this is pretty standard approach that we've taken to balance things out. So then moving around the city, one advantage you'll have with reviewing the scenario 16s is that the population adjustments aren't as dramatic between the city and the county, and therefore some of the wards in the city legislative districts balance out entirely and work well at the negative side of the county. And in the first scenario of 16B3A, the area that is legislative District 5 now includes that Renwick Heights and East Shore Drive area as well. So instead of going east into the town, we went north. Okay, and that balanced out pretty well. So that was pretty clean as well. And so those are the only two areas where the city and the town share populations between legislative districts in this proposal. The next complication that we ran into with producing scenarios 16 is the village of Cuba Heights and the village of Lansing again. So we made the decision to keep both the villages completely intact and not divide any populations in the villages. So in the V3A, you'll see that Cuba Heights stays intact and then moves in the easterly direction into the town of Ithaca up to Warren to grab that neighborhood over there as well. So that balances out for Cuba Heights and part of the town of Ithaca. And then the population for the village of Lansing is associated with the southern part of the town of Lansing population. And the population in the town of Ithaca to the south of Lansing on the other side of Warren Road and reaches around to the city through Forest Home.
And which district number is that?
That would be 7, District 7. The problem, or one of the decisions we had to make once we got to that production and level of deciding where to add the population to District 7. If you go north, then Lansing bleeds into Groton, and then it goes around the county, right? That causes a whole other set of problems that you saw in the 15 scenarios, right? If you go towards Dryden, it goes the other way. Then you end up in a dead end with population in Lansing and not enough split. So we looked at where to best add population for the town of Lansing. So we started, moving north with the community of interest idea that the town and the village in that area are pretty much similar, or more similar than any other area that we're looking at for this scenario. And across the municipal lines was probably not the best interest for the group. So we said, how far do we have to go to the north, and still balance out the District 8 for the town of Lansing, keep that in. So that was the approach that we took. Then if you go around the town of Ithaca, just to keep that going, you'll see that District 12 is that south eastern corner of the town of Lansing with the circle apartments. So
Town of Ithaca.
yes. Did I say city?
You said Lansing.
Oh my gosh. The town of Ithaca, yes. And then you'll see that the western part of the town of Ithaca stays intact with the core of IC associated with that. Moving around the county then, it's pretty well balanced between the municipal boundaries or close to what we have now. The exception is that in Groton, you've got to grab some population to give to the Groton area. So instead of going as it does now to the west into Lansing, we went and it goes further south into Dryden. We just went in one direction, which is towards Dryden, but in the northwest corner of Dryden. The districts 11 and 10 generally get split east and west in Dryden, keeping Freeville and the village of Dryden together in District 10. The nice thing about this one is District 13 keeps completely intact Caroline and Danby without any deviations. The line changes between the Newfield, Enfield, and Ulysses Enfield district a bit from what is there right now. And so one approach that we took to balance it out is to take just one section below 79 that's closer to the town of Ithaca to the east of Enfield, up to Boston Road between Boston and 79 and associated with District 16. So in this scenario, there are a few boundaries that you can play with. And I'll talk about those in a second because Jan was a big help in producing the next version and came up with an idea that we didn't consider. I'm going to move on to that whenever you're ready.
Go ahead, Marcia.
I was trying to figure out, because I saw the differences in the numbers with the Village of Lansing and town, exactly what you changed.
Is that a question, Marcia? I didn't.
So what specifically in there did you change? Because I looked and I couldn't really see what was changed between scenario 16V3 and 16V3A.
The only thing, the biggest difference between scenario V3 and V3A is in V3A, we matched the city boundaries as closely as possible, which we did not do in V3. So our first takeaway from the last meeting was to try to match the city ward boundaries at the conclusion of their recommendation as closely as possible to present the city. That's what we did. Okay. But otherwise, it's the same. Yes.
Anyone else have a comment or a question about V3A? Everybody's good. Let's move on then to V4.
Okay, I'm going to move on to V4. There are only two changes between V3A and V4. The first of which is that the Renwick Heights East Shore Drive gets associated with District 7, which is the Village of Lansing in the southern part of Lansing. And then that drops around into the town of Ithaca District 7, but not all the way to the city boundary. And District 5 then moves out towards Forest Home into the town. So if you look at the northeast corner of the town of Ithaca, you're going to see the difference there. That includes also the Renwick Heights and the East Shore Drive area.
I think I like V3A better in that regard. I think those. Follows the municipal lines. Similar.
One thing I noticed on 16V4, we haven't really talked about the area of Enfield, Newfield, Ulysses.
Right.
But in Enfield, which I'm familiar with, it does divide the exact center, the hamlet of Enfield Center, which is right at 327 and Enfield Center Road, right between two districts.
When I had mentioned,
which is very unfortunate.
yeah, when I had mentioned that there's a couple of areas that you can play around with, that's one of them. So you can move populations back and forth between 16 and 15. and we did one way in V3A,
Mhm.
and then we played around with doing an entirely different way in V4. So there may be other options. So when we get into this level of detail, you know, the blocks in the Enfield area are fairly large. So you have to be careful. So we tried to balance it out without compromising, but you're right. We had the only way we could balance it out in this scenario before is to split the center of the hamlet area, which is really not intended in any way.
Greg, do you think if you, this is a hypothetical, went to 17 representatives, you could keep the city intact without having to bleed into the town?
I can't remember. Hold on a second.
Do you like a
Yes.
17 scenario? So
6,000, what is it? 220 and
yes,
yes,
and city.
pretty close.
Yes, 6,400.
Oh. We could try. I mean, it's gonna be close.
200.
I do remember, however, that as the 17 district scenario had been configured, that none of us really liked that at all.
Yeah, it changed quite a bit in the rest of the county.
The city is good, but the
Right.
county is.
But didn't explore it moving around. So back to 16s, like I said, there's a few borders that we still have some flexibility to play with, and one of those is the border across Enfield. But you know, we looked at trying to do it at least two ways. Not to say that there is a third way. The border between South Lansing and north of the village there becomes a little bit difficult, and we're going to look at that a little bit more in detail. So there's some population in there that's pretty significant based on the suburban blocks that throws it one way or another. So we try to do our best to pick a line or boundary, but that can be looked at again. And there,
Marcia, when you refer to that hamlet in Enfield being split, is that the Route 79?
No,
Line?
that is 327 and Enfield Center Road. Which is,
South of the school.
yeah, which is
north and south.
covered up by the flag for 14. That's Enfield Center Road, which is right there, dividing line.
That's where the town hall.
Town hall and school and really the center of the community.
Yep.
Which is why it's called Enfield Center.
Svetla shared Jay Pals with me, and I had a chance to play, and I have a lot of appreciation for the work you guys are doing. Yeah, with the old version 3.3, the deviation was just above 5%, and this you list this was kind of the constraint.
Yeah, I mean, in this work, it's so close on the 5% variation. You grab one little block and it throws it over.
Yeah,
So you end up, playing around with which block do you grab between two districts when you get to the end of this process. And, that's why between the lines that I'm talking about, we spend a lot of time trying to balance out 8 and 7, for instance, and it's 15 and 16. Right. So once we had something like Danby and Caroline intact, we locked it in and said, okay, we're not going to touch this. Right.
To me, the dividing lines here between 8 and 7, Lansing Town and Village, appear totally reasonable based on how I at least see communities of interest in those areas.
Yeah.
And the one that you're referring to, Marcia, is?
I'm right now referring to 16.4, but also if I look at
They're
16.3, they're
same.
the same. And I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, the one thing we were talking about the last meeting, that's a little bit of a blip, but I think it's something we probably have to live with, is that extension down into Forest Home.
Yeah.
But it's not perfect, but I think we may have to live with it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I like about 3.4 is the Forest Home is more towards the Ithaca area and the lakeshore towards
Yeah, yeah.
Lansing.
Right.
Although I think the bulk of this Renwick area really considers itself part of Cuba Heights. I think it makes,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it fits
I
better
think so
with
too.
Cornell Heights than it
Yeah.
does with Town of Lansing.
Mhm.
And I agree that Forest Home
Yeah.
is just hard to.
But it's like, we may just have to look. But I would agree with what Margaret says about that Renwick area.
Just note, so that all of you are aware that in the email that was sent to me today by Chuck Sarah, he indicated that he was inclined to support 16 version 4. The alternatives that he had before him. Didn't feel, terribly strongly about that, but that was where he was.
And Hank and Corman just joined the meeting as well.
Okay. Hello, Ann, welcome.
Thank you.
Minimize that. So
It's not me. I can stop sharing. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chairman, now would you like to see if we can narrow it down between 16V3A and 16.4 and send Greg and Zletna back to work on that? I did not hear a lot of enthusiasm for 15.
I think I heard Margaret indicating a 15 preference at one point. Am I wrong?
Not today.
Okay. And that is correct. What?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. But can we perhaps agree that we are at this point relinquishing consideration of the 15 district scenarios?
I would agree with that.
I mean, I'm looking around and I see most folks nodding in support of 16, and I see Carolyn doing that on the screen. Thank you, Carolyn.
yeah, and I can tell you from somebody who has tried to make 15 work many times, it's really impossible to do. With the variation at 5% and the numbers, 15 seats on the legislature just don't. If we're trying to maintain some semblance with Board of Elections and the city wards, it just doesn't work. So it's very difficult.
We just ask everyone again if you have any strong feelings about the even number versus the odd number question. You know that some members of the county legislature said it didn't matter. Others who have spoken to us were quite concerned that it did. So
They've made it work for 10 years. I think they can make it work.
Yeah, they did with that one exception.
So what,
But again, it's just so difficult with the reduced 5% deviation that we are legally allowed to do to make the numbers work.
okay, so let's concentrate then on the scenario 16, both 3A and version 4. Do I hear from any of you a preference between those two?
Three.
Margaret's indicating three.
Three.
Three from Jeff,
Three.
three from Marcia. Elliot?
Can we just, other than where the line is in Enfield, what's the other major difference between the two? I'm looking at my maps and I'm trying to remember what the major differences are between the two 16s.
Great.
The second major difference, Carolyn, is the northeast corner for the town of Ithaca on district or scenario B3A wraps around all the way to the city.
Okay.
And legislative district 5 goes up East Shore Drive, Renwick Heights area.
Okay.
And version 4, legislative district 5 does not include East Shore, Renwick Heights, but instead goes in the easterly direction into the town of Ithaca to the Forest Home area.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Jan?
I don't have a strong preference for one or the other.
Okay.
I could really do either of those if on 16 4, that border in the town of Enfield could be adjusted.
Yep. It can be. We can interchange those without any problem.
And Margaret?
I prefer 3A, but also could live with 16. I mean, 4.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I think they're both very strong.
So if we worked with 3A and you had some adjustment for Enfield, is that what I'm hearing you would like, Marcia?
no, if the will was to go with V4, and I would support that if that border in the town was readjusted, but I could live with either of these.
So I think I'm hearing majority of the group for the 3A version. Greg, is there something that you see that you would want to tweak on 3A?
Yeah, I would want to look a little bit more at the boundaries of Enfield that Marcia was referring to, and present some scenarios other than what exists in 3A and give you the range of options there, keeping with the Enfield Center intact in all scenarios. The other boundary that I think we could look at again is the boundaries between districts 8 and 7, or the village of Lansing, the town of Lansing, and see if we can zoom in on those areas and tell you exactly what those streets and neighborhoods look like as well. When we were doing these, we got to a point where we were trying to balance out the numbers and we were trying to pay attention to that, but I think we need to do a second review of what some of those blocks were identified in moving them to balance those two districts out.
Okay, well, that's our plan for 2 weeks hence. Ann Corman, you were not here at the start of the meeting when I invited members of the legislature and other members of the public to give us comments. We would be delighted to hear from you as well if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with us.
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, I actually was chimed in on the meeting about 10 of 6, but probably didn't see me since you were doing a presentation. So as far as the districts go, I haven't gone over every single one. But I know I really applaud you trying to keep as many jurisdictions intact, because that is you know, a huge issue. So I appreciate you trying to do that. So the only thing that I would add, which you're also kind of considering, is that not just for representation, but just working at the legislature, adding 2 more people, you know, might be challenging. But I've never worked with the 16 legislators. I've only worked with 14. Just thinking more opinions, more, you know, we have lengthy meetings, which we're always trying to keep, you know, shorter. And so it's, even though there's more meeting and you're thinking of more representation, people aren't always going to be heard. We're not able to hear everybody now, because we're just trying to not have our meetings drag on for 4 or 5 hours. So that's just one consideration, but that I wanted to just bring up. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, here is the agenda I would like to follow then. For 2 weeks hence, we have Greg coming back to us with the adjustments that we just spoke about, primarily in the Enfield area. I would hope that we can come to conclusion on recommending a particular map at that time. If we do, I would like to see us go through the various statutory criteria that we are obliged to follow, one after the other, and make sure that we are comfortable with the choice of that particular scenario, that it meets the standards that we have been following in terms of the people population, the contiguous districts, the non-adverse effects on minority voting rights, that the districts are as compact as practicable, that communities of interest have been recognized to the fullest extent possible, and last but not least, that the efficiency of election administration is recognized as well. If that is, everybody is comfortable with that, then I would suggest that we prepare a report to go to the county legislature based on that exercise. We can meet 2 weeks after this next meeting, which in a sense is a month from now, and adopt a report to go to the county legislature. And then the county legislature will make its own determinations as to the steps that it wishes to take. How do you all feel about that as a course of action? Yeah.
Does there need to be a kind of official ask for public comments?
You're quite correct. My apologies. When we have the decision on next week, we have a decision on that. I would like 2 weeks after that to have a public comment period.
During the next commission meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. Absolutely right. My apologies for skipping that. It's a procedure that we followed with the city group. I think it worked quite well, and recommend that we follow the same practice here.
There would be some way after the meeting in 2 weeks to publicize the recommendation and then.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if we make that decision next 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks after that, which is in a sense a month from now, have the public reaction to what has been proposed. And that public reaction could come not only from the public as a whole, but from members of the county legislature, other municipal officials. We take that into consideration, and at subsequent meeting, which would be 6 weeks from now. And all goes well, send it off to their honorable bodies in the county legislature.
So is this the point that's best to look at school district boundaries and see how they overlap? I just know that was brought up a few times throughout this process when we've had public comment, concerns about how the school district lines line up.
Yeah, we can be prepared to present the school district boundaries at the next reiteration of the maps. And we have been using them in the background as we decide on where to go with some of these boundaries between municipalities. In particular, we're looking at Groton and Dryden in that scenario. So that was one of the reasons we shifted over to that corner of Dryden.
That might make a difference in the town of Lansing too, to see where.
Right, yeah,
school is.
absolutely.
Yeah, because that,
Yep, yep.
it's
Right in
somewhere in
that
there.
area.
Right,
Yeah.
it's really close, but that, yeah, thank you, Caroline. That's a really good idea as well for that. I think that would be helpful for Lansing.
Okay. Thank you, Carolyn.
You're welcome.
Yeah. We haven't had an opportunity to ask our distinguished county attorney if he would like to share any thoughts now that he's listened to this discussion tonight. Tell us if we are still in compliance with the laws.
Certainly seem to be
State
in
of the art.
compliance, and you've worked hard, and looked at every angle. I think this is totally defensible, the choices you put forward. Good work.
Thank you. Greg, you were
Yeah, I
going to
just
say
have
something?
one question, and then maybe it's just clarification. For the next round of maps, are we looking at the scenario for the town of Ithaca, Forest Home, or an East Shore Drive? Which one? V3A or V4 version? I can't remember.
3A.
3A. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, got it.
Mr. Troy.
Just to follow up on Carolyn's comment about school districts. Why would school districts be that concerned about where their lines are compared to? It's really going to be a big issue.
I don't think it's an issue with the schools themselves, but in terms of communities of interest, I think that, if you live in Ellis Hollow, you're in Dryden, but you're part of the Ithaca School District. And I think that makes a difference in feelings of community.
Also, aren't the schools often polling places? So I don't know. I would just think it's just one more thing to make life easier.
That's a good point. We should really ask our elections people to come in before we start signing off on this list.
Oh, absolutely. That's actually, just so you're aware, that's been done all the way through. They have
I've never
been,
been here, but this is the.
Yeah. And I do
Right.
recall at the last meeting, Steve DeWitt was here, and he said that 16.3 he thought looked very good from an election district perspective.
right. No, I think we are in safe territory there with the Board of Elections. Greg, anything else?
I would just, I can reach out to the Board of Elections, let them know where we are and invite them or encourage them to attend the next meeting.
Okay. Any other subjects anyone on the commission would like to raise at this time? If not, I'll recognize someone for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Margaret. Seconded by Marcia. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy.